What I'll do just to start with is to ask them to introduce themselves and a little bit about what they do. So if I could perhaps start with you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Of course, thank you. Thank you, everyone. My name is Asif Faruque. I'm head of content for a technology community based in Canary Wharf called Level 39. There are about 200 technology businesses working there in that office, in a skyscraper. They range from early stage businesses to late stage businesses, and 150 of them are working in Fintech, and I've been there for about 4 years.
Thanks. Helene.
I'm Helene Panzarino. I'm Managing Director for Rainmaking Colab, or some of you know as Startup Bootcamp Colab for Fintech in London and New York, and the evolution of the accelerator program that we've rolled out to deal with scale-ups versus startups and meaningful commercial execution with Tier 1 financial partners.
Hello everybody, I'm Hisham Erafas, co-founder of the Merit Protocol. It is a token issuance platform on the blockchain for issuing digital assets in order to raise finance, get finance, but also tokenize assets and services. So my background is corporate finance. I've been working with GE Capital for about 12 years in distressed debt and workout and restructuring.
Thank you. And just to try and make myself relevant to the panel, I'm the director of Little Tokyo 2, which is a series of co-working space and startup incubators and accelerators in Australia. So I'll bring a global perspective to the panel. Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks very much. So I'd be really interested, one of the things that came out on the VC panel was that London's a kind of a talent cluster, so people are attracted to come here. And clearly coming through all of the discussions yesterday and today, talent is absolutely the key to a successful future. So I'll just put to all of you one by one, just talking about what are the key issues for you in terms of creating a startup ecosystem, and how do you really nurture it and develop it so that you can create that talent cluster here in London?
Frictionless. We've had the joy of living in this there's a single zone where people can come and work freely. If that is taken away from us, it is difficult, and it goes without saying it's going to be difficult. There are ways around this, and I think of all the problems that I could bring up now, muster up about our departure from the European Union, I would have thought access to talent remains my biggest priority. So I think the work that organisations like TLA, Tech London Advocates, are doing in increasing the amount of Tier 2 visas, or at least lobbying for it, and any comments we can make towards the government to ensure that they make it as frictionless as possible for high quality talent from the EU to come in and base themselves here would be excellent. And as a final point, as I walk around Level 39, I have this pleasure of there's about 50 different nationalities there, so I walk through and I hear Italian, then Korean, then Mandarin, then whatever it may be. And that is what I think is one of the key strengths of our business, is that diversity, so we absolutely cannot lose that.
Thank you.
There's a couple of angles for me on this, because at what was, again, in London and New York, when we ran the Startup Bootcamp Accelerator, we were bringing companies globally to London to participate in the accelerator in Fintech. We run programs in 7 other locations in Fintech, and we as an organization are global. So we scout globally, we see over 8,000 companies a year. And one of the difficulties early on was always getting them to be able to stay once they went through the boot camp here. And I agree with Asif on the talent visas. This is absolutely fantastic that we have more, but now can we actually see them being used and executed so that people can stay? At the same time, we've moved on to what I say is a scale-up program, and the companies are Series A to B. They have a need for talent, and so they're going to have to start looking for talent as well. The other side of my life is education. I teach the Fintech Masters at 3 universities in London. I'm not seeing a ready-made pool of talent that will produce itself by 2019 to fill the gap. I see we're on that journey, particularly, for example, in blockchain. We're on that journey, but we're not there yet. And there will be a gap, and we can't ignore that or pretend that it doesn't exist. I see some of our companies already taking some early advantage, moving to Dublin, to Amsterdam, to Berlin. I'm sure most of us were at Many 2020, where we saw that Amsterdam's housing prices are 40% higher than they were last year. It's not a panic anymore, but it's a measured response. And lastly, I am Italian, so I hope that they sort this out so I know where I'm going.
Thank you.
At Merit Protocol, I mean, we're looking for talent. Obviously, the team is growing, and our reality is in London is an expensive place to be. So obviously, we have to give a good compensation enough for people to be able to afford just to be around our offices. I think so. We're competing obviously with financial institutions for talents, and that's our reality in London. So a lot of the work also we do is actually with overseas talent that obviously we're going to try to give them access and bring them over to London, but sometimes it's not possible. So we do a lot of the work online, outsourced, but I think so far what we've seen in London, myself being a French citizen, I have, during my time in GE Capital, it's true, I mean, London was a very open place, top talent from all over Europe, and also obviously from top universities and school in London. And that was a very creative space and interesting and motivating environment. Now, hopefully with Brexit, we will have the relevant provision to allow for that stream of talent to still come in and support the creativity of the fintech industry in London. But I'd say but as a startup, really, it is difficult. Our advantage is obviously we can offer equity. There are other upside we can offer, and maybe the young people are getting more and more receptive to the potential upside they can get working for a startup as opposed to a big financial institutions. Also, I would say financial institutions have lost a bit of their shine over the last five or 8 years or so.
Let me stay on the talent question for a little bit longer, because I think it's really critical to this whole ecosystem, because there's a worldwide shortage, for example, of blockchain developers. And yet it seems that this is such an incredibly important part of our future. So the standard pathways to becoming a developer is perhaps something that we need to have a look at. And a couple of months ago, I was in Nigeria. We did a hackathon and a blockchain conference. But one of the things that I was quite impressed and startled by was just this huge push by the government of Lagos to really grow tech. They have Code Lagos, which is saying we're going to train 1 million developers in 5 years. They've given a large amount of land to create tech hubs and so forth. So I think we're going to see emerging talent coming out of probably unexpected places. But I think the other thing that I'm seeing too is that some of the developers are not going through formal programs. So they just started playing games and then they taught themselves to develop, and they're very talented and now they're working. So maybe I'd be interested in some of your thoughts about how do we really accelerate the growth of talent to be able to work in this digital future that we know we're going to have?
It's a really good point, and I've been thinking about this for a while, which is there's the work that the government can and is doing with regards to equipping the youngest of pupils with those skills. So when I was at school, and I think that perhaps for a few others here, IT was a completely different kind of subject. It was very superficial. It's now, with the addition of hardware, Arduinos, Pis, and whatnot, computing has become a far more hands-on experience, which is going to filter upwards, which is critical. But something I've certainly noticed is that at the later stages, barriers to entry into technical professions has lowered considerably. So once it was a common rule of thumb that a computer science degree is what you'd need in order to have a technical role. It isn't quite like that, actually. From my experience, I subscribe to a platform called Code Academy, $20 a month, and I get taught JavaScript. It holds my hand, and I get some progress, and I'm getting to a stage where I feel relatively competent. There's also private sector organizations, which I'm just so impressed with. So Makers Academy has just come out of nowhere and is pumping out great quality talent, just getting hired by the private sector. There's Code First Girls, an initiative which is getting young women into this profession with free after-school, after-work classes. So no longer is a technical profession is only reserved for those who've gone through the formal structure. The barriers to entry are much lower, and I'm happy to see that.
Thank you.
I would add to that, and I agree with you, as if the government is picking up and now we have the Coding Academy, that I know of pockets around London where for example, for certain parts of society that sometimes tend to be marginalized in these job roles. There's some training academies that are going to be launching that are not as expensive as some of the others are, which will then help them stay through the course of it and get a job and be more practical. And the other thing I think is we shouldn't always look to the public. We should be private sector driven again. Places like Starling Bank, they train everybody who joins the organization who doesn't know how to code in coding, which I think is a great thing. Anne's leading the way there. And I think if more of the private organizations took that on board, it is a blend. It is a public-private thing.
Thanks. Eshem.
Talent, I mean, I'm going to talk about blockchain specific. I mean, there's a shortage of blockchain developer, and we have to be quite open as to who we work with and where we go to find the people we need in terms of developers. We work with developers in India, in Pakistan, in the US, and it's a challenge. I'd rather work with someone in London, of course. Now, I think there's a lag, obviously. Talented developer and coders, I think they already have jobs. They're already in financial institutions, and the other pool of talents, they're probably doing their own projects. So to actually find a blockchain developer, you have to go your way, out and really be creative. But I think this will, over time, with the different initiatives mentioned previously, I think over time we will be able to close the gap in terms of talent availability. But right now, it's a challenge, yes. Mm.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt globally we need to grow this group, and I think many governments and private sector organisations continue to have that challenge. From a UK point of view, I think the visa issue is clearly one that you continue to make UK an easy destination for talented people to come. Let's just move on to capital, because one of the big challenges for startups and entrepreneurs is access to capital. So it'd be great to hear from you both about, is London the kind of place that would attract startups because they can get money? Are you seeing changes because of the kind of crypto financing that's now being much more influential in the space? So I'd love to hear what's going on in terms of access to capital.
I mean, every day I read reports that investment into both the UK, into Fintech, hasn't really waned since the vote. If anything, there are statistics showing that we've attracted more investment, and that's probably because a lot of the investment that comes into UK fintech businesses is from West Coast smart money, who are just spotting great opportunities for businesses to grow. So, although there will be some barriers, although there may be an argument that the UK and London is a less attractive place to invest in, the data I've seen doesn't suggest that at all. If anything, things are looking up, and it was only a few weeks ago, Level 39, that one of our companies, Revolut, announced their $250 million raise, taking them to unicorn status, and we didn't feel as if, oh God, this has happened despite Brexit. There's no air of that in our offices. It's just a case of you're an entrepreneur building a great business, and you've earned investment which reflects the quality of that. We're just keeping on working.
That's a fantastic story. Helene.
Revolut, one of our overseas people who came to the UK to create a successful business. We see it, obviously, we saw it from the startup side in the accelerator where we have investment in the companies, and over 70% of our companies get follow-on funding. So it's not, I agree with that, it's not been a problem. I think when Brexit was first announced, there was this kind of, not a panic, but a surge of uncertainty, which led to a little bit of paralysis. And also at the same time, we had Donald Trump, so it sort of froze things a little bit as well. Which I think was a good correction in the market at that time, because it was after the 2014 FOMO and money was being thrown at everything. I did investment readiness and introduction to funders for over 20 years. I have seen a lot happen in that time. So I think also our tax system, the SEIS and the EIS schemes make it very attractive to set up a company in the UK. My concern is staying in the UK, and I'm glad to see the patient capital review. I'm glad to see that there's been an awareness of the fact that Silicon Valley is putting in the later stage money, and we should try to respond, whether that's here or that's on the continent, which is fine. But of course, the second part of your question is the ICO, and there's been a bit of another FOMO on the ICO side, And I think regulation might level some of that out. I also think, and this is, I love the investment community, but sometimes you just have to step back and think, what is the foundation of the business before I look at something that is exciting and that shiny object of the ICO.
Thank you. Esham?
Yeah. I definitely think London remains an attractive place to raise capital in Europe. There's still, despite all the noise around Brexit, I think London is still a good place to be to look for capital. Now, obviously, different stage of fundraising require different type of investors. For ICOs, this is not. There's been a lot of hype, and it's true there's a lot of capital, but I think this has been more global, not specifically in London. There's still a lot of more money coming to the blockchain that is on hold for now from institutional investors, simply because the regulation around crypto and blockchain is not there yet. But we've seen some of it going into early or late last year. The ICO space remain, very interesting, but it's very unregulated. So obviously, not every investor can actually touch this space. Yeah.
So we've got the Bank of England coming in a little bit later, so we'll be able to ask them some questions. But I want to go to the audience for some questions. But just before I do, if you had one major policy issue that you wanted to put to the government to say, if you don't do this, then we're not going to be able to maintain London as the sort of financial tech startup ecosystem that people really want to come to, what would yours be, the kind of top policy issue for government to be thinking about to keep London as the epicentre of this?
I would say passport, but we would like to be registered in the UK, enjoy the capital, be able to tap into the capital that is available around in London, and be based here and deploy our services from the UK to the rest of the world, Europe in particular. So with a passport, like we have today, that would be great. Now, obviously, everything is in negotiation right now as we speak, and most recently, passport's been something off the table, but I'm quite confident into believing that the government is going to have a pragmatic approach for financial services. Yeah.
Thank you. What would you say?
Unsurprisingly, I'm going to say talent.
Mm-hmm. So it's the visa question, the passport question.
Yeah.
For me, it's the passport question as well. So our financial services sector is contributing the most, if not one of the most, to the economy. They're envied the world over. The brains of these people working in financial services and fintech is just incredible. We need to make sure it's their ability to sell to the continent and their ability to be sold to by the continent is as smooth as possible.
So that's pretty quick. That's pretty clear. You heard it at London FinTech Week 2018. Get those tweets out and let's try and influence the government on this point. So can we go to the Slido questions, please? And if there's anyone who'd like to ask a question, there's two people with mics. So I'll take the first question here from the Slido. How open are you to bringing talent from other parts of the UK as opposed to just London?
It's a given.
It's another question.
Okay, that's not a question.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's your answer. Okay, which universities or programs, not necessarily universities, are producing the best fintech talent?
Yeah, so I've got a friend. He's a mentor at Level 9. He's former City, and he runs an online learning course, CFTE. He's done that in his spare time, and it's training people to be fintech leaders and entrepreneurs. So I'm very impressed with his work.
Yeah.
I'm going to be slightly biased. We just launched Rainmaking Academy this week. So at Rainmaking, we also have FinTech executive education training. And again, I teach at Imperial, CAS, and UCL, all different flavors. One is finance, UCL is tech entrepreneurship, which is incredible. And the other is the MBA program.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'd mentioned the same names. Obviously, we'd like to see more initiative from outside of the traditional educational system. We remain open. Talent is not necessarily today in the strictly speaking, within university or the educational space. So
Okay, so let's take the next question, which is which cities are you seeing as the biggest contenders to London? So who could take your crown?
I just want to dispute this question very, very slightly, and it's something I've been thinking about for a while, is I don't really think this is a zero-sum game. There are some aspects of it which are, perhaps, when we lose employees or staff to go somewhere else. But if fintech wins on the continent and fintech wins around the world, fintech wins for us as well. As long as this industry advances, it will benefit us, and that's the right frame of mind to have in particularly turbulent times as we are in now.
I would agree with Asif. I think that the short-term reality is that we'll see probably tens of thousands of people leave and go to other places for passporting rights, whether that's Dublin or Amsterdam or Berlin. And again, language, most of it is English-speaking culture. We won't see as much going, for example, to New York, I don't think. But we should hold our position.
I don't see any contender.
Okay, that's pretty clear. So is there anyone wanting a mic on the floor, or we'll just take another couple of questions? Because I like this one about how can industry influence or help what kids get taught in schools? Because, I mean, one of the issues about how you develop talent is to start early, making sure that kids are developing digital skills from the moment they come into school. So how can industry influence what's going on in the education system here to be able to build that talent pool?
We see people already like Sherry Coutu doing Founders of Schools, where you have founders going into schools to talk about what they do in their businesses early on. Raspberry Pi ran a program probably around 2013, 2014, starting as well. And I hope, I don't feed back into the Department of Education, but I hope they are feeding back into the Department of Education to put it on the agenda and adjust the curriculum for the early stage.
Great. Well, look, I think we've run out of time, but I think the message from this is talent, 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 and do whatever you can to get it. I'd really like to thank the panel. I hope you found it an interesting session. I've enjoyed moderating it, and it's just been great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Big hand for the panel.